I want to segue now from the instructor's guide into the scheduling piece of it. I know oftentimes new homeschoolers, if they're pulling their kids from school, they want to kind of schedule their day like a school day, or maybe just because that's all they've ever known in their own education, they want to schedule it kind of in that school model where 8 o'clock we do this subject, 9 o'clock we do this, 10 o'clock we do that, whatever it might be. Is that necessary when you're homeschooling, or is it even helpful? Is there a time you should consider a schedule like that?
I did start out in that way. I do have an education background and I kind of think in time blocks in that way. But then I quickly veered from that because, again, my kids are like, Mom, read one more chapter. And so then we would sit there and read for longer than my schedule allowed me to read. And then I would run out of time and not get to another subject. And then I would be frustrated with myself because I didn't follow the schedule the vertical way. Day 26, I didn't check off every box because we often would work horizontally. So what do I mean by that? So each day will have a list of things for you to do within these different categories. But if you are reading one more chapter and one more chapter and one more chapter, you're going to work this way and you're going to run out of time. So you may not get to everything that is on the vertical column. That's okay. That's okay. I discovered that the world does not end when that comes up. So what you do then is the next day, you go back and you see, ooh, what did I not cover on day 97, the first day of the week? And you start with that. And then you might do a couple of days of that. Or you may just want to bring it up to, if you're on day 2, you'll do the day 1 and the day 2, and you get caught up. And then you go to another subject. One of the things that I quickly learned is that there are a lot of books that you are opening and closing and things like that. So I learned to streamline that. And the best way that I found is to block schedule history and science. History and science are not skill-based subjects, so they are not the kinds of things that you should do a little bit every day in order to build and build and learn and learn. It's just exposure, and it's sequential. There is a sequence to it. But it's not like you have to do it every single day. So I found that if I would read a double day of history on Monday and skip the science, and then the next day I would read a double day of science and not do history, that's one less book I had to find, flip to the page, get, what page am I on? It just streamlined things so much. So that's one thing that I did. Another thing is, you will often see we have poetry at every level, which is great, but they assign one poem or one page. And one page is, it's pictures, and a poem is short. And so you can easily read more than one page. So oftentimes we would read 2 weeks worth of poetry in one day. So I would just check. And then we didn't touch that book for 2 weeks. And then, 2 weeks down the line, I would see, oh, we don't have poetry checked off. We're going to do that this week. So don't feel like you have to follow the schedule as written. If you do, it's great. But we find that, you have to adapt to your family, and that's okay. If you have multiple kids, there's a little bit of a juggling act that you do. There are things that you can combine and do together, and then each child needs to do their own skill-based thing. So you need to figure out, are you going to let a child work independently while you work one-on-one, or is everyone going to be doing their table subjects at the same time? That's what I did, because mine were close enough in age that I would get one going, then I'd get to the other one, and then I'd get to number 3, and then I'd get back to number 1, number 2, and I just kind of just did laps around the dining room table while everyone did their math. If a child finished their math, but another child is still working, I would dismiss that child to either go to the bathroom, did you brush your teeth this morning? You need to go brush your teeth. Or if it was snack time, they could go and get their snack. Or if they were thirsty, they could go and get a water. Or they could get their next book. Like, I didn't want to lose them to toys, because then I couldn't get them back. So I would try to keep them busy in some way. And that is where I started to use the optional books that you might see in the language arts section. A lot of people will ask us, what is this optional stuff? The Explode the Code, the Wordly Wise, the MCP phonics, things like that. That is just busy work. It is. It's busy work. If you never do it, it's fine.
I never use it. My kids can read, they can write, they can do all
Yeah,
the things.
and yours is far enough apart that one was already working and she's, you know, firstborn girl, whatever. But mine were close. And so I needed to keep them busy while I finished up. You know, this child needed a little bit more help with math, and we weren't ready to go back to the couch and do our history. So I would say, here, do a page and explode the code, or here, do a page in Wordly Wise. And so I just used it to kind of keep them busy while we were wrapping things up. They are optional. They're scheduled for you. We never followed the schedule because the way I was using it was to keep the child engaged and busy. So I only pulled it out when I needed it. It's worthwhile. It's good stuff, but it was not essential. So that's how you can do a schedule. You can block it. You can alternate between couch subjects and table subjects, because if you sit and write for 3 hours straight, you know, your hand gets tired and you don't want to do that. And mom cannot read for 3 hours straight. I've tried, but you lose your voice. So if you alternate, and that gets kids up and moving, you're up and moving, you can stretch your legs. It's a good way to kind of keep things balanced, if you will. What did you do, Son?
Yeah, so I was gonna say the most stressed out homeschoolers I've talked to are the ones that are trying to limit things to specific times. You know, like, oh, at 9 o'clock I'm going to do this and I need to be done at this time, because that almost never happens, that it's going to go exactly how you want it. The only time that I've heard of timers being helpful is maybe you have a kid who is just, they're lagging, they're struggling to get done with something. And you might set a timer like, okay, let's be done in 30 minutes. And so you might do a timer like that. But somebody who says at 9 o'clock, we're all sitting down at the table and doing Bible, to me, that's a recipe to set yourself up for a lot of stress you don't need. Sheila, you said earlier, don't create work for yourself. Also, don't create stress for yourself, you know, and I say that as kind of an uptight person. We quickly discovered, my husband would tell you a very uptight person. We discovered that going with more of a routine versus like set hours of like, okay, we're going to start with history and then we're going to do math. And then you mentioned alternating back and forth. I alternate between me reading and my son reading so that he doesn't get tired, because at this point he doesn't have quite the same endurance that I do to read. So I go back and forth with his reader, his Bible reading, those types of things, so that he doesn't have to read for a long block of time either. Same thing with the written assignments, but we kind of go back and forth like that. I always tell people your first week with Sonlight, try to use the schedule vertically as written to see if it will work for you. But after that, you know, flex it, like what you were saying, Sheila, with block scheduling or working horizontally. I will zoom in on this where people will be able to see it, but I just mark through things. So you can see, like, I've got a couple of things here that aren't done. This is actually from last week that I still need to mark off, but I might be like 2 days up here and like 4 days down here. It just kind of depends. As long as I'm done by the end of the week, I don't really care. And so what I've learned to do is I just put all the books on the table, and I actually let my kids say, okay, let's do this first. Let's do that. Oh, I want to do this first. And you'll find some kids want to get the hard stuff out of the way first, whatever that hard subject is, or the one they don't like as well. Others will save it to the end. But when you give your kids a little buy-in into what books are we doing now, if they're really loving a book and they want to read it first because they're excited to find out what happened, they're going to be more engaged. I've never had a huge issue with the kids wanting to wander away or being super wiggly once they got over the early years. Kids are going to be super wiggly in the early years because they're getting to set the schedule, and it's okay, we're going to be done. I never work more than 2 or 3 solid hours, even with my 4th grader. If we do not finish something, it's okay. We'll just move it on to the next day. Like what Sheila said, the next day, come back and say, oh, we haven't done any history this week and it's Thursday. We probably should do some history. But look, we finished all of Bible. We finished all of poetry, whatever it might be. So yeah, really allow yourself that flexibility. Do not lock yourself into a schedule. This is also going to give you freedom if you have appointments, if you have a co-op, if you have somebody coming over, whatever the situation may be. You don't get locked into, oh, we're behind. That is the worst feeling, I think, when you're homeschooling, is that you're behind, but there really is no such thing. So give yourself some freedom there.
But I think we have to also remember this is our job. And so we have to honor the fact that, I mean, a lot of people are like, oh, you're home. I'll just stop. I'll pop in, or, hey, let's have lunch, or, and they'll treat you like a person who doesn't have a job, but this is actually your job. You don't have a take-home paycheck for it, but it is your job. So you have to really kind of guard your time and not allow things to come in and steal your time. So I just wanted to
that's a great point too. My husband and I were actually talking about this the other day because he went to run some errands, was trying to reach me. I wasn't responding because I was teaching the kids. I didn't have my phone near me. And he's like, that was weird. You didn't answer. And I was like, I was teaching. When I'm teaching, my phone, and I even tell the kids, if I'm in the middle of something, unless a bone is poking through your skin or the house is on fire, do not bother me in the middle of working with this child or whatever I'm doing. Because like you said, Sheila, there will be a ton of distractions that will try to come at you. And I love what you said too. If you're homeschooling, other people don't quite get your schedule unless they've been there themselves. And so they might say, well, you're home, you can pick up my kids. But again, if you're going to make room for those things, make sure you're scheduling your school around that as well. Let's talk about like morning times, bedtime read alouds, reading during meals, other ways. Maybe if you feel like you can't get to all of school during your regular school hours, how do you squeeze it in and make sure it gets done?
So some of the tricks that I've used is especially when I'm combining kids, but even when I'm not, we will often do a read aloud. If I can find it on audio, back in the day, we had CDs that we would play in the car. These days, it's a lot easier. We have apps we can stream and things like that. But there were times when it was like, oh, we got to leave for soccer and we're not done. So I'm going to pop in the audio version of the history book. Story of the World comes on audio. We had all of the Story of the World CDs. And so when we were doing those levels, G and H, a lot of times I didn't read history. I let Jim Burns read history, and and we would do that on our way to soccer. So if there are things that you can do, if you can multitask like that, that will help stretch your school day. A lot of people will do Bible at breakfast. Some people will do Bible at bedtime because it's like nighttime devotions. We always did our read aloud at bedtime. I've already shared that. You can have an older child read to a younger child. So if you're doing two different levels, and so therefore you have two different histories and two different read alouds, you can utilize an older child to read aloud to a younger child. That gives them practice reading aloud because that is a skill. I was listening to someone this morning and they were reading and it was very monotonous. They were reading it right off the page and just it was just like, oh, she hasn't had a lot of practice reading aloud. So reading aloud is a skill that is learned, and the way you learn is by practicing. So if you can have an older child, that will help buy you some time. When you have very young kids, a lot of times reading aloud during meal times or snack times, especially with toddlers in the house, that's a great time. You put them in a high chair with some snacks, and then they're kind of captive and they can't go paint on the walls. So you can do that. That means that you may not get to eat lunch when everyone else is eating lunch. You'll have to sneak bites while they're doing their math or whatever. But yeah, so there's just a plethora. I mean, everyone is going to have, something that works for them is not going to work for you, and vice versa. You were talking about timers. I actually did use them because I have two boys and they're very competitive. And so they would want to race the timer. So I found we would get math done really fast if I set a 10-minute timer and they would try to beat the clock. That's how I used it, not so much for ding, 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 the bell's ringing and now we have to go to math class. I didn't do it that way so much. So, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I use timers with my son as well. If he wants to earn a privilege of some sort, oh, I want to go outside, or oh, I want to watch a show, or I want to do whatever. I'm like, okay, well, how fast can we get math done? How fast can we get handwriting done? And again, I kind of threw it to him. Do you think you can get that page done in 5 minutes or 10 minutes? Within reason, not like 4 hours or something. But I have found in letting my kids manage their own time, and I know I've said this in our Sonlight Connections app with my high schooler, as long as she is ready when I want to discuss her schoolwork, I don't care when she does it, which that is mind blowing to a lot of people. And they're like, what? Teenagers are on different sleep schedules. We all know this. She finds she gets distracted when we're all awake and all around. And so she likes to work late at night. There's no other distraction. And so she does read late at night. And then I let her sleep in. And to me, that is not bothersome at all, because she is learning to manage her own time. She's always ready, because we set the expectation at the beginning of the year that at 4:30, I want you ready to discuss your schoolwork with me. And to me, that is better preparation for adult life when she'll have a job and things to manage than me really writing her case about her schedule. So if you are finding that as your kids get older, they're a little harder that way, maybe experiment with that and see what your kids are capable of, because they probably will surprise you a little bit there. Let's also talk about incorporating breaks without school taking all day. I saw this question recently where somebody has a teenager, but also she had younger kids, and she was saying it's taking 12 hours a day for her between wrangling everybody, getting school to happen. This child needs a break. And you mentioned it earlier, Sheila, if they go to their toys, they're going to have a hard time pulling them back. What are some ways that you can incorporate breaks? Because we know people need breaks, especially young children, without ending up in a situation like that where school is going to take you all day now because you're constantly trying to rein everybody back in.
Yeah, I never allowed any screen time during breaks. I was a little bit of a hard nose about, TV and videos and stuff like that. So we did not allow any screen time until all school was finished. That was a reward. That was a privilege, not at all an expectation. So no toys. The toys they were allowed to play with during read aloud time, I did find that if their hands were busy, they would focus better. So I did allow them to play with puzzles, Lincoln Logs, Tinker toys, like all those buildy kind of things, even Legos. It would get loud sometimes. So sometimes I would say, you take 2 hand scoops, lay it out on a blanket, and that's all you have to build with what you got. You can't dig in the big bin, or we're going to start read aloud time in 10 minutes. So you go find whatever it is that you want, and you can get it out and ready. I don't mind. But that's, they were allowed to play with those kinds of toys. But as far as going in their room or anything like that, so the breaks that we would take would be for snacks, so food equals mood is what my husband likes to say when we go on hikes. Like, if you start to get grumpy, you probably need to eat. So snacks were, and they're growing kids, they're growing boys, and they burn a lot of energy, so they need snacks. So we would take a break for snacks. We would take a break for lunch. My husband often came home for lunch, so he would walk in, hey, what's everybody up to? And he would want to know what's going on, and they'd give him a recap of their school day. We would sometimes take a break for a little recess, like we would go outside. I live in Florida, so we can do that a lot. I understand if you can't get out because there's a blizzard outside, it's going to be different. But sometimes, especially boys, they need to get their gross motor skills going, and they need to burn a little energy. And so to go outside, to take a 10-minute break and go outside and ride bikes, jump on the trampoline, like whatever it is. And then they're tired and they want to come back inside because it's hot outside. And then they'll settle down and do the next phase of whatever is left to do in our school day. So I do think that breaks are appropriate. But I would hesitate to let them go watch a show, get on their tablet, play a tablet type game, because I think they'll be distracted and it'll be hard to get them back.
Mhm. I agree. And I'm very similar in that if we take a break for any reason, it's to go clean up a mess or, something like that, that's not exciting. They're not going to want to do that any longer than they have to. So yeah, it's not like, oh, go be free. My kids get free time once they're done with school. But in the case of Wiggles, a 10-minute living room dance party will solve a lot of problems. If you've got a wiggly kid that needs to burn energy, if you have a tired kid that doesn't seem to be awake and engaged, if you have a moody, it's impossible to have a 10-minute dance party and not come out of that happy. I don't think. I grew up in a family where we danced a lot, and so for us, we just find music, we turn it on, we dance around the living room or wherever we are, and then you come back. Okay, now we're going to do school. And if you give the kids something like that to look forward to, also a lot of times they'll stay more engaged. I was talking in the Sonlight Connections app the other day about how we did pool school one day, where we went to the pool and you had to give me 30 solid minutes of school time, and then I would give you up to 30 minutes of pool time. And so then you could go swim, then you would get out and do more school time, and we just kind of went back and forth like that. So if you have some way to incentivize the kids like that, they will be excited. Food, always a great reward as well. So great ideas there. Let's talk about preventing that overthinking and getting overwhelmed. I would say most of the questions and comments we see, a lot of times it's us as parents overthinking it, getting overwhelmed because of something that we are getting worked up about that really isn't a big deal.